What's going on, guys? It's the Draft Nerd, and it's a Monday, which means it's Mock Draft Monday, and it's the first one of April. The draft is only a few weeks away, and with that being said, there's a lot of rumors going around, a lot of smoke screens, so this should be a fun mock draft. I'm going to do a bunch of different picks, lots of trades are going to happen in this mock draft, so without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, coming in at number 1, we got the Chicago Bears, and we're not going to change nothing up here. We're not going to try to get too fancy with the number 1 overall pick. It's going to be Caleb Williams. They traded Justin Fields. It's going to be Caleb Williams every single mock draft from here until the draft, for me at least. So that's more of a foregone conclusion that that's going to happen. Now, moving on to number 2, where the draft actually starts, I'm going to do it. I'm going to feed into the hype. And at least for this mock draft, I am going to go with JJ McCarthy. Now, if I was the general manager, right, I would not be picking JJ McCarthy. I'm a Drake May guy. I think Drake May's QB2 pretty comfortably, but you can't ignore the hype for JJ McCarthy. Come draft day, is this, the most likely outcome? Maybe not. But isn't it, a possible outcome? Yes. So it's, kind of necessary to play around with different situations because draft day is full of surprises, full of quote-unquote reaches, and, good players fall in the draft. So I'm not saying this is the likely possibility, but this is a possibility. Now, moving on to number 3, we got the New England Patriots, and, this could be a trade down spot. It definitely could be, but I think it's about a 70% chance that this is going to be a quarterback pick, especially if the Commanders go JJ McCarthy. You have 2 really good quarterbacks still on the board, and I would just have a hard time thinking that the Patriots would pass on that. So we're going to look to go with probably Drake May here. I think Drake May is the second best quarterback, so getting him at 3 is kind of a steal. Moving on to number 4 here. Again, this is another trade down spot. I think 3, 4, and 5, or at least one of them teams are going to trade down. And I think the most likely one is going to be the Chargers. I think the Cardinals stick and pick here, especially if Marvin Harrison Jr. is still on the board, which he is in this scenario. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is suffering from a little bit of prospect fatigue. There's a lot of circulation going around that, Malik Neighbors is a lot of teams wide receiver 1. Rome Odunze is wide receiver 1. And although I think that might be true for 1 or 2 teams, I think the majority of the NFL knows that Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best receiver prospect in this draft, and he's probably the best wide receiver prospect since, the Jamar Chases of the world. So, in my opinion, that's a lock for Marvin Harrison Jr. to go around this top 5 range, and it's a lock for him to be wide receiver 1 in the class. Now, here at number 5, we have the Los Angeles Chargers. And I think this is where we get our first trade of the draft. Now, in my opinion, I do think that especially if Jaden Daniels is still on the board, the Vikings have been very active and making sure that they traded with the Houston Texans to get that 23rd overall pick. So, don't feed too much into this trade. You never know exactly what the teams are going to trade, how much it's going to cost. But I do think it's going to be along the lines of both their first round picks and then maybe like a pick swap. Maybe something around that range. Again, none of that really matters just because we're only doing a first round mock draft. So just for the video's sake, we're going to have them trading pick 11 and pick 23 for pick 5. And now we have the Minnesota Vikings on the clock. And you trade up this far, you give up that much, draft capital, you're going to go with a quarterback, and the only other quarterback on the board is worth taking with a top 10 pick is Jaden Daniels. And, I'm not opposed to this. They still have Sam Darnold who could, play the first half of the season or even the full season and let Jaden Daniels just develop under him. They have that option for sure, or they could, start Jaden Daniels day 1. I think they have that flexibility, and I think they have that flexibility no matter who falls, except for if JJ McCarthy is the pick here at 5. I think JJ McCarthy needs time to develop. He cannot start day 1. Now moving on to number 6, we got my favorite team, the New York Giants. And with how the boards fall in, I think it's got to be receiver here. I mean, Joe Alt is, would be nice. Having Evan Neal kick into guard. I mean, is it a possibility? Yeah. Is it, really likely at all? I don't think so. I think the only other likely possibility is if one of those 4 quarterbacks fall to number 6. I think the Giants would probably take a JJ McCarthy or Jaden Daniels if they fall here at 6. But in this scenario, they all went off the board, so I think it's a very easy pick between Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze. I go back and forth here. I'm more of a Malik Neighbors fan, but I understand why some people would want Rome Odunze going to the Giants at 6, just because he's more of that prototypical number 1 receiver type of build. Malik Neighbors is a bit on the smaller side, I guess you could say, even though, he's got fine size. He's not undersized by any means, but when you think of that prototypical number 1 receiver, that's the build of Rome Odunze. But in this scenario, I go Rome Odunze a lot, so I'm going to go Malik Neighbors here. I do think he's a better prospect, just by a little bit. Now here at number 7, we got the Tennessee Titans, and they've done a good job at bolstering that offensive line, and if they didn't go out and get Calvin Ridley, I think this might be a Rome Odunze pick, but they went out and got their receiver. They have Treylon Burks, DeAndre Hopkins is still on the team. I think they're pretty set at the receiver position, at least this year. And so I think you just continue to build that offensive line. You did a good job by last year drafting Peter Skoronski. You brought in Lloyd Cushenberry this year to play center. So why not get that left tackle of the future in Joe Alt? Moving on to number 8, we got the Atlanta Falcons. And, it's very tempting to go Rome Odunze here. I know they brought in Darnell Mooney and Rondale Moore. Is that really going to stop you from getting a potential all-pro receiver? Probably not. But they did bring in a defensive-minded head coach in Raheem Morris, and with their pick of the top defender, because so far we've gone nothing but offense, which this is a top-heavy offensive class, but with the Falcons in here at 8, and they have their pick of either a Dallas Turner, a Quinion Mitchell, or Jerzon Newton, maybe a Byron Murphy, I have a hard time thinking a defensive-minded head coach in Raheem Morris wouldn't want to go and get, an unbelievable defensive talent. And in my opinion, I think that's Dallas Turner. The Falcons desperately need help on that defensive line. They have Arnold Ebiketie, which I was a big fan of, but he's no number 1 pass rusher. And I think Dallas Turner could develop into that. He's still a bit raw, don't get me wrong, but I think he could very easily develop into a top 10 pass rusher in the league in, 2 or 3 years. Now here at number 9, we have the Chicago Bears, and you got Caleb Williams, you got your quarterback of the future, at least you think you do, and so I think I know you brought in Keenan Allen, you have DJ Moore, but if you really want to just ensure that Caleb Williams succeeds day 1, you could get Rome Odunze as well. I was a big fan of Tyler Scott coming out of Cincinnati last year, but Rome Odunze, having Rome Odunze as your 3rd best receiver, that's the makings of one of the best wide receiver cores in the NFL. And Keenan Allen's more of a 1-year rental, so I could really realistically see them going Rome Odunze here. They could also look to, trade down, and I've done that a few times, and I'm going to have them sticking and picking this time, and I'm between Brock Bowers or Rome Odunze. And I'm leaning more towards Rome Odunze this time around. Having DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, and Keenan Allen for Caleb Williams to throw to. If Caleb Williams fails at that point, I don't know what to tell him. Moving on to number 10 here, we got the New York Jets. And they did a good job at, bolstering that offensive line, bringing in Morgan Moses on the right side, and on the left side they got Tyron Smith. The thing is, Tyron Smith is always injury prone. It would be nice to maybe get that backup tackle, because both the tackles are old. Both of them, could easily get injured, especially Tyron Smith. But I also think you could trade down here. The top 3 receivers are off the board, which I think could have been a possibility. Brock Bowers is a really enticing pick here. But all in all, I think I'm going to have them trading out of this pick. And I'm going to have them trading out with the Raiders. And for videos purposes, I'm not going to, go too into detail on the trade, but I think it could look something like 13 and 77 for pick 10, something like that. So we're going to go ahead and force that trade through. And now we have the Las Vegas Raiders picking at number 10. And I think they go with their top cornerback on the board. And, that could be a Terrion Arnold. It could be a Quinton Mitchell. And it could be a Cooper DeJean. But I'm, pretty well convinced that it's going to be between Quinton Mitchell and Terrion Arnold for that CB1. And I'm going to go with Quinton Mitchell this time. I think he's a bit of a better prospect than Terrion Arnold. And moving on to number 11, we got the Chargers' first pick, because with that trade, they do have the 23rd pick as well. With this first pick, I think it could very easily be just a Brock Bowers pick. I mean, Jim Harbaugh loves his tight ends. And, again, one of the best tight end prospects we've seen in a while. I mean, I think that's a realistic option for, pick 5, realistically. And when you trade back, you gather some more draft capital, you feel better taking that chance on a Brock Bowers. So we're going to go with Brock Bowers here. Just getting some type of weapons for Justin Herbert to be able to throw to, because, that offense is depleted now with Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, Michael Williams all off the team. So you need at least some target for Justin Herbert to throw to. Moving on here to number 12, we got the Denver Broncos. And, this could be a QB pick. Michael Penix and Bo Nix, you could convince me that the Broncos draft one of those guys here, but I have a hard time thinking 5 quarterbacks go with the top 12 picks. I just don't think that's very likely. So I think that the Broncos, look to trade down here, just gather more draft capital, because they've been depleted, draft capital wise since the Russell Wilson trade. So I'm going to look to trade down here, and I'm going to look to trade down with the Cincinnati Bengals. And I'm going to have the Bengals trading up. Again, don't take too much stock into this. Something like that. I'm going to have them trading up to get their left or right tackle. They kind of need both. So I'm going to go up and get either a Talise Fuaga or a Talise Fuanga, I think is how you technically pronounce it. Or maybe a Troy Fautanu, Olu Fashanu, who I'm still a very big fan of. I don't like that rank 18. I think Olu is, around a top 10 pick or a top 10 talent. But all in all, I am going to go with the Talise Fuanga. Joe Burrow got injured. He's battled injuries because his offensive line has been very bad. So you got to get him protection at some point, and I think this year needs to be the year. Now, we had the New York Jets here at 13 after trading down from pick 10. And I think this is where you could get that insurance on the tackle. Like I said earlier, Tyron Smith, he hasn't had a full, healthy season in a long time. Morgan Moses is also up there in age. So you got to think past just this year. And I think you go with the Olu Fashanu, who's a really polished pass protector for the most part. I know he has small hands. I know he struggles with power, but I still think Olu Fashanu is a top 15 talent, top 10 talent. And Tyron Smith, if he's healthy, he's a really good left tackle. He's just not always healthy all the time. So, again, just an insurance policy there with Olu Fashanu, I think is a very good pick for the Jets. Now moving on to the Saints here at 14. I think that, again, this has got to be a tackle pick here, especially with guys like Troy Fautanu and, I think J.C. Latham still on the board. Ryan Ramczyk, at least from what I've read, it's not looking good. He might retire, or at least he's not going to come back and be that same type of player. So both tackle spots are pretty wide open right now, and I think you need to fill at least one of them in this first round. And I think you either go J.C. Latham or Troy Fautanu, because Troy Fautanu for me is a tackle now. I think he deserves to play tackle. But with that being said, I'm going to go with J.C. Latham. I just feel a little bit more comfortable with him succeeding at tackle than I do Troy Fautanu. Moving on to number 15, we got the Indianapolis Colts. And, they love their height, weight, speed freaks. And you know who is a height, weight, speed freak? That is Brian Thomas Jr. I think you need to get Anthony Richardson all the receiving talent you can, because Anthony Richardson can be really, really dangerous if he has the proper talent around him. So having Michael Penix be that big physical receiver, Josh Downs being that slot receiver who can get open, with ease, and then having Brian Thomas be that deep threat and just being that big athletic body, I think that's a perfect receiving core for Anthony Richardson to come back to. Moving on here to number 16, we got the Seattle Seahawks. And I know I just said that I think Troy Fautanu deserves to be a tackle in the NFL. But if the Seahawks are here at 16 and Troy Fautanu's still on the board, I think they draft him and push him into guard because I think he could be an all-pro guard, or I think he could be a really good tackle in the league. Either way, I think he's going to be a really good player in the league, whether that's guard or tackle. And if the Seahawks draft him here, it's probably going to be a guard, at least, year 1 and 2. But again, I just have a hard time thinking the Seahawks pass up on Troy Fautanu. They could also go with a Jackson Powers Johnson, who I think could play center or guard. But Troy Fautanu is just too enticing of a pick there at 16. Moving on to 17, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I think this is either a wide receiver pick with the loss of Calvin Ridley, or this could be a cornerback pick. And with a lot of good cornerbacks still on the board here at 17, like Cooper DeJean, Nate Wiggins, Terrion Arnold, Kool-Aid McKinstry, I think that Jaguars would have a hard time passing up on guys like that. And so going with a guy like Terrion Arnold, who has all the upside in the world to pair alongside Tyson Campbell, I think the Jaguars would love to do that, and then look to get Trevor Lawrence some weapons in, day 2 of the draft. Moving on here to 18, we got the Denver Broncos after trading down with the Bengals. And again, do the Broncos draft a quarterback here? I think it's in the realm of possibility, but I think they could also go with an edge rusher or a defensive player in general. I think the Broncos, they just need talent. They're pretty depleted when it comes to just talent in general. And so I'm going to go with one of the better players available in my opinion, and that's a Jared Verse. The Broncos don't have any type of edge rush help or any type of pass rush besides like maybe Cooper. What's his name? Jonathan Cooper. But he's more of a rotational pass rusher anyways. So getting Jared Verse to be that bookend edge rusher is, a good start in the Broncos rebuild. Moving on to 19, we got the Los Angeles Rams, and I'm going to do it. I know it's a very cheap and kind of cheesy pick, but Aaron Donald retired. Jerzon Newton is an undersized, penetrating defensive tackle. Not saying he's Aaron Donald by any means, but I think he would be a really good replacement. I mean, I also think Byron Murphy could be a really good replacement, but I've always been a bigger fan of Jerzon Newton. I think he's my defensive tackle 1. And so getting him here at 19, I think that's a steal for the Rams. And they just need, defensive talent in general. And so I think Jerzon Newton's best player available on the defense there at 19. Moving on to 20 here, we got the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I don't know what quarterback is a need still. I mean, they have Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Anyways, I think they still need offensive line help. I've never been the biggest fan of Dan Moore. I love Broderick Jones, and I haven't done this in a while. And I know a lot of, draft YouTubers do this, but pairing him up with former teammate Amarius Mims could be enticing. I mean, Amarius Mims is definitely a raw prospect, doesn't have much experience just playing at the college level, but when he has played, I mean, he's shown a lot of promise. And so I don't really think the Steelers would draft him and need him to start day 1, because I still think Dan Moore is serviceable. But, having Amarius Mims and Broderick Jones develop together, you could have one of the best tackle duos in the league in about, 2 or 3 years. Moving on here to 21, we got the Dolphins. And you could look to go with the Leatu Latu, Nate Wiggins. But I think they desperately need help on that interior of that offensive line. They really just need help on offensive line in general because, like, Teron Armstead is always injured. So I'm going to look to either go with Jackson Powers Johnson or Graham Barton. I know Graham Barton's listed as a tackle, but he's definitely going to project more as a guard in the NFL. Either way, I really like JPJ. I have a hard time thinking he falls past the Dolphins here. I think he could go to as high as the Seahawks here at 16. I think the Jaguars would think about drafting him, although I think they have more pressing needs. I mean, I think that Steelers could draft him as well, but I don't see him getting past the Dolphins. So we're going to go JPJ there to the Dolphins. Now here at 22, I think we're going to have another trade because the Eagles have, really spent some money in free agency. And so I think they need to kind of garner some draft capital. I think Howie Roseman would be fighting hard not to draft Leatu Latu or Byron Murphy here just because he loves drafting defensive linemen. But they don't need it. I know they traded away Hassan Reddick, but they brought in Bryce Huff. Nolan Smith needs a chance to, really show that he's talented because I really like Nolan Smith. So I really don't want them drafting defensive line here. And I'm going to have them trading back here. And I'm going to have them trading back with where are they at? The Buffalo Bills. We'll do pick 28, pick 60 for pick 22, and like 120 or something like that. Again, don't take too much stock. This is only a first round mock, so it doesn't really matter. So now we have the Buffalo Bills drafting here at 22. And I think they go with A.D. Mitchell here. I might be a bigger fan of A.D. Mitchell than I am a Brian Thomas Jr. A.D. Mitchell might be my receiver 4 in the draft. And getting him at 22 is a steal. I think A.D. Mitchell is if CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens had a baby. Like, that's what A.D. Mitchell is. So, I mean, he's a really good receiver prospect, and him and Stephon Diggs paired up, and Josh Allen throwing them the ball, sign me up any day of the week. Here at 23, we have the Chargers picking with their second pick, and we went, where did we go? We went Brock Bowers with pick 11, so I think you got to look to go defense here. I mean, if A.D. Mitchell fell to them at 23, I think that could also be a small possibility, just because they need offensive talent or receiving talent in general so bad. But I don't really think there's another receiver worth taking here. So I'm going to look to go defense here. And I mean, the secondary is pretty depleted. I know they have Asante Samuel Jr., Derwin James, but they need help at that cornerback 2 position. And with Cooper DeJean and Nate Wiggins and Cooler McKinstry still on the board, I think they choose between one of these guys. And realistically, I think it's a Nate Wiggins here. I know he didn't have I don't want to say he didn't have the best draft process because he ran extremely fast at the combine. What was it, a 4.29, I think? But he's super, super light. He needs to pack on some weight. So hopefully he comes in to training camp a bit heavier, but either way, I think he deserves to be a top 20 pick. So at 23 there to the Chargers, I think that's a very good pick for him. Moving on here to 24, we got the Dallas Cowboys. And this is kind of a tough pick here. I mean, I usually like going Tyler Guine here, especially with Tyron Smith gone. But I do that a lot. Graham Barring could also be a pick here. Offensive line in general is a pretty big need for the Cowboys. Losing out on Tyler Biadasz as well at center. But I go offensive line for them almost every time, so I kind of do want to switch it up. And Leatu Latu's usually not here at pick 24. So, I mean, I know they have DeMarcus Lawrence, Michael Parsons, but Lawrence is getting up there in age. And, replacing him early, I mean, that's what a lot of good teams do is they look a couple of years in the future. And having Leatu Latu just being a rotational pass rusher year 1 and then taking over for DeMarcus Lawrence, in a year or two, I think that's a good idea. And I know they have more pressing needs, like, they need a receiver, they need offensive line help. Here it says defensive interior help, but I'm a big fan of Mozzie Smith, so, and they also have a Diggy Zua as well, so I like their defensive tackles, so I don't really think that's a need with Byron Murphy still on the board. So I like the pick of Leatu Latu, maybe not the most pressing need, but it is a fun pick. Now here at 25, I usually have Cooper DeJean. I usually don't have him getting past the Eagles at 22, but with them trading down, I think the Packers would love a Cooper DeJean to play that, either that slot role, even maybe at safety, outside corner. I think that the Packers would really use him in a unique way and have him actually be that Swiss Army knife that I think he can be. So my 2 dream fits are the Eagles or the Packers there. So having Cooper DeJean fall to the Packers, I love that so much for him. Moving on here to 26, we got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they now need cornerback help. They really only have Jamel Dean back there in the secondary. And, people are saying Coley McKinstry might not be a first-round pick anymore. I don't buy into that. I think Coley McKinstry is definitely a top 32 pick. So, I usually go edge rusher here for the Buccaneers, but now that cornerback's a pretty big need for him, I think Coley McKinstry's got to be the pick here. Now, moving on to 27, we got the Arizona Cardinals. We had them going Marvin Harrison Jr. with their first pick. And here with the second pick, if Byron Murphy's still on the board, they need help on that defensive line pretty badly. So I think that's a no-brainer. If either Byron Murphy or Jerzon Newton falls to him, I think you got to go with that. Now, moving on here to 28, we got the Eagles. And, we could do the fun pick here and go with maybe a Peyton Wilson. I really love Peyton Wilson. I know he's got his injury concerns and stuff like that, but I really love him. And the Eagles could use a linebacker. Nakobe Dean's undersized. I was never a huge fan of him, but pairing up Peyton Wilson with Devin White, oh my, I would love that. I don't think it's realistic though. Howie loves his offensive line / defensive line picks, and I think he goes Tyler Guyton here. I know Eagles fans probably aren't going to like that at all, but Lane Johnson's not going to play forever. Getting Tyler Guyton in early, like Howie Roseman loves to do, having him develop, and then, be the next, best right tackle is probably what Tyler Guyton's going to be, learning under the Eagles offensive line. So, as much as Eagles fans probably aren't going to like it, I think Tyler Guyton's got to be the pick here. Moving on to 29, we got the Detroit Lions, and I think that they got to go offensive line help, especially in the interior. I like their tackles, but their interior needs some help, and Detroit Lions love running the ball, and I usually go Zach Frazier here, but I do that a lot, so I'm going to switch it up, and I'm going to go with Graham Barton. I do think Graham Barton's a better prospect than Zach Frazier, so let's go Graham Barton here, and moving him into guard. And he could also play center if you really wanted him to. He's got all the versatility in the world. Now here at 30, we have the Baltimore Ravens. And they lost OBJ to free agency. That was always going to be just a one-year rental. And Rashad Bateman, he's not worked out as that number one guy. And they have Zay Flowers, who had an amazing rookie season, but he is more of a slot guy. I don't think he's a number one. I think he's a great Robin to someone's Batman. And I don't know if there's a Batman still on the board here at the receiver position, but there is still some really good ones. So we're going to look to go receiver here. Oh man, who do we go here? I'm a really big fan of Troy Franklin, even though a lot of people are starting to sour on him. Ladd McConkey, I don't think he would fit well with Zay Flowers on the team. Same with Roman Wilson and Ricky Pearsall. Keon Coleman, maybe. But I'm going to switch it up here. And I know he's ranked 63, but I think Xavier Legette could definitely sneak into the first round here. He's a bit of a bigger prospect, but he's still extremely fast, extremely athletic. So having Xavier Legette be that number one option, or that, that X receiver, having Zay Flowers in the slot, and then Rashad Bateman being that Y receiver, it's a good receiving core. It's got potential. And so I really love Xavier Legette. So I don't know how Ravens fans are going to like that pick too much. So let me know down in the comments, I guess. Now here at 31, we got the 49ers, and this is either tackle or cornerback. And I don't really like the tackles or the cornerbacks that have fallen here. I really don't think there's let's look at the tackles. Yeah, Kingsley Suamatea, Kieran Amagaji, Patrick Paul, Jordan Morgan, like these guys, I don't think they're first round guys. Jordan Morgan, maybe. Let's look at the cornerbacks. Where's the cornerbacks at? Oh. TJ Tampa, Mike Sanders still I really like, but he is a slot guy. Kamari Lassiter. I do love me some Kamari Lassiter. Oh, should we go Kamari Lassiter here? I don't know how well received that's going to be. I'm a big Kamari Lassiter guy. I kind of hope he falls to my Giants in the second round, but he's not going to in this mock draft because we're going to have him going to the 49ers with the 31st overall pick. And now to round things up, we got the, it seems like the Chiefs are always in the news for some reason. And here lately it's been because Rashee Rice is, as of the making of this video, a wanted man. The police are actively looking for him after the racing crash that sent 2 people to the hospital. I'd say there's a pretty good likelihood that Rashee Rice doesn't play next season, or maybe, there's a chance he doesn't play in the NFL again. This could be a Henry Ruggs situation. Either way, even if Rashee Rice was to play next season, I know they brought in Hollywood Brown, but that's more of a 1-year rental. So I still think this could be a receiver pick even if Rashee Rice does somehow play next season. So I don't know if I want to attack this with the notion that Rashee Rice isn't going to be playing next season. And I think I am. I don't think Rashee Rice is going to play next season. Or at least he's definitely going to be suspended for at least half the season. So I'm going to go through this process with the notion that Rashee Rice isn't going to be playing next season. So really all they have is Hollywood Brown. And so I think this could be a Ladd McConkey pick. Again, I wouldn't be making this pick if the Rashee Rice stuff didn't go down. I would probably lean more towards a Troy Franklin or a Keon Coleman. But if Rashee Rice isn't going to be on the team, I think Ladd McConkey could be just an amazing option for Patrick Mahomes to throw to, because Ladd McConkey can get, he can get open in a split second with his route running ability. So we're going to go with Ladd McConkey here to round out the first round. And so that's going to do it. Let me know what you guys think of this draft. Definitely a bit of a wonky one, but as the draft gets closer and closer, a lot of these things are going to kind of, settle down. All the smoke screens are going to, kind of blow over. But for right now, I definitely fell into some of these, quote unquote rumors. So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think of this down in the comments. And if you like the video, consider subscribing. I'm going to be posting almost every single day this April leading up to the draft with my, my positional rankings, mock draft reactions, and a couple other videos sprinkled in. So definitely subscribe and stay tuned for, this next month. And with that being said, this is the Draft Nerd, and thanks for watching.